We're my time in Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, so basically, this I guess is a discussion for today. It's also a discussion for tomorrow, and it comes up a few more times in the Masechta. This thing of meitav, right? What does meitav mean? You have to pay the best property. Also, see, it's not so simple actually. We'll get to it in a few minutes. Never simple. There's a lot of questions here. In general, whenever you talk about the best, like what does the best mean? Who is best? That's the question you said yesterday. Is it the best of the nizik, the one who was damaged, or is it the best of the damager? And then you have other questions, right? Which we'll get to later, which is the best an objective definition or is it a subjective definition? Right? Is there sort of a category, like in the mortgage-backed security business, and really in the securities business, everything is rated, right? There's things that have an A rating, there's things that have a C rating, or things that are unrated, So what exactly does this mean? Does it mean that it's rated by Moody's, has a rating, or does it mean that it's inherently subjective? What does that mean? That means that if you only have one property, all your property is both the best and the worst. Right? If you have one class of property, it's all the best and the worst because it's this complete. Okay, a lot more of these questions we'll have to address. The first question though was machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Shmuel says b'di nizik shaminan, Rabbi Kiva says b'di mazik shaminan. What does that mean? According to Rabbi Shmuel, the definition of the word meitav is defined by the best of the nizik, the one who was damaged. And according to Rabbi Kiva, it's the best of the damager. And the Gemara wants to know my time. Okay. My time to Rabbi Shmuel. Never sad l'mata and never sad l'malo. We talk about a ubir b'stei acher, right? What does ubir b'stei acher mean? It consumed in a field that did not belong to its owner, right? So the animal went to somebody else's field and consumed something. Right, we said ubir b'stei acher, that is actually referring to either shane or regal. So either it was pleasurable consumption or it was casual damage. Okay, and what does the Torah say? Meitav sadehu, the same word, right? So you have sada. Ubir b'stei acher, meitav sadehu. Which field is ubir b'stei acher referring to? The field that was damaged. And so too, meitav sadehu refers to the same field, the field of the damager. In other words, the definition of what constitutes a high quality field is determined by the one who was damaged. Okay. Outside the nizik. For Rabbi Kiva, what does Rabbi Kiva do with that? He says, Meitav Sadehu, Meitav Karm Yishalom, to Echtikam Yishalom. It says, Meitav Sadehu Yishalom. The one who gives the payment pays the best of his fields. What does that mean? Who makes the payment? The damager. Right? The guy who makes the damage, he has to pay. Therefore, it's the best of his field. Okay, Rabbi Shmuel says, what does Rabbi Shmuel do with the fact that obviously the logical conclusion is pretty similar to Rabbi Kiva, right? If you're paying, obviously your field is the field of the damager. The damager is making the payment, so what does it do with that component of the pasuk? He sort of makes a compromise. Generally speaking, we're going to go with the best field of the nizik, of the one who was damaged. But there is an exception. What's the exception? Okay, so typically it's the Xereshava, it goes with the nizik, the one who was damaged. You have to pay. In other words, let's say, let's say with an A rating is the lowest and an A rating is the highest and E rating is the lowest. Just typically how it's done. So you have the nizik, he has what is it? D, C, D, and E. Right? So the nizik's property, the best property is a C. His is a C. According to Rabbi Shmuel, if the mazik, the one who damaged, has A, B, and C property, he pays which level? According to Rabbi Shmuel, he pays C. He pays C because the damager has C-rated property. He only has to pay C-rated. The best of the damager is C-rated. He has to pay C-rated. According to Rabbi Kiva, obviously he pay A-rated. Now, Rabbi Shmuel would agree to Rabbi Kiva in the following scenario. Let's say the guy has 3 properties. He has one that's unrated. It's so bad. And then he has let's say an F and a C. I'm sorry, an E and a C. So he has unrated, which is terrible. It's a former gas station that was condemned. Okay, condemned gas station. So it's really like this thing is unusable for the next 30 years. I remember when we went to Yeshiva, there was a big condemned gas station on the way. And somebody eventually, this was when I was in Yeshiva, like 20 years ago, somebody just started excavating it. It took that long to get all the permits and stuff and pump it out and whatever. Anyway, so that's his unrated property. And then he has two more properties, right? An E and a C. And then the mazik, okay, listen closely. The mazik has a D and a B. So what's a D? A D is less than the best property of the nizik. The best property of the nizik is a C. He has a D and an E, a D and a B. Can he get away with paying the D property, or does he have to pay the B property? So here Rabbi Shmuel says, look, if you can't give the best of the nizik, which would be a C, because you only have a D, you don't go down and say, okay, here's a D instead. No, you go up. You have to give your B property. Does it make sense? Okay, the mazik, the damager, has idis v'ziburis. Like we said, he has B and D. The idis l'nizik, and the best of the nizik, which we said was the C, v'ziburis the mazik, and the worst of the mazik, which was a D, lo yishav idis l'nizik. One second, hold on. Okay, yeah. So they added another word here. Basically, the best of the nizik, which would be a C, does not equal the best of the mazik, which would be a B. But the worst of the nizik, which is unrated, does not equal the worst of the mazik, which is an E. Right? Or I'm sorry, or a D. So therefore, the Mishal we made today that in this case, because the best of the nizik is a D, is a C, and the mazik does not have C property, he only has D or B. You can't go down and give him a D property. You have to go up and give him a B property. So the you can't tell him go collect from the worst property. Now the government made that he collects from Meitav. Rabbi Kiva says, Rabbi Kiva says the nizik collects from idis, that would be the idis to the mazik, and certainly anyone who collects from hektish also collects from idis. So the Gemara says, "My kal v'chomer hektish." Before we even get to the kal v'chomer, we have to know in what scenario are you paying hektish and why are you paying them? Hektish obviously is the temple fund. Why are you making a payment to the temple fund? So that we know that you have to pay with the best level property. So he has a few suggestions. What's the first one? The most logical. There was an animal that was a sacrificial animal, or let's say it was a workhorse animal. It was literally a horse, right? Hektish needs to have horses. So they have a horse, and your animal gored the horse of hektish. So the halacha would be that you pay from meitav. You'd have to pay the damages of meitav. Rabbi Kiva says no. Shori eu am rachmana v'lo shor shel hektish. According to this opinion, if your animal gores the animal of hektish, you're exempt from payment. It's only your friend's animal you're obligated to pay. Hektish, you're not obligated to pay.
Why?
What?
Why?
It's a very good question. I'm not going to answer your real question. Is not your question is not is what would the understanding be why hektish would be exempt from payments?
Yeah. Another question, and you may have already covered it, and I just simply didn't understand. Okay, your horse does, I guess, or I don't know, maybe an ox. Because I'm talking goring here; it's a little easier to envision. Okay, your ox gores another ox. But your ox, the quality really sucks. I mean, it's poor, it's gross, it's emaciated, it's the best you got. And the other guy had a really cool ox.
In general, there's two things here. If it was regel, for example, your weak ox would just casually knock the what do they think called the winner of the rodeo. What's that? That's what they call them? Not the rodeo. What do they call them? They sell the oxes. They sell it. They sell the cows. The auction.
Okay.
Your animal, or the fair. Your animal got like the big, the big ribbon at the fair.
Yeah.
And this weak animal just casually pushes him down. Then you'd pay everything. If, however, it gores, then the maximum payment would be the value of your animal. And the reason for that is because goring is considered an abnormal behavior, and it's extremely difficult for the owner to predict what is normal and abnormal and to take the precautions necessary to prevent that. So therefore, we generally view the owner as we'll get to it later,
Okay.
more detail. Okay, exactly. There's two ways to understand this. It's machlokes thing about that. According to one opinion, you should be completely exempt because it's something you can do about it.
I want your stinking little beater. I want your nice new car. I've seen it.
Okay. Okay. So why does the guy owe hektish money? Because he committed a donation $100. The treasurer of hektish, called the gizbar, very common term in Shas, he comes and he collects from the best property. So the Gemara says that can't be. The gizbar, the collector, should be no worse than the balchayev, than any person who's collecting a debt. And a debt collector gets middle level property. So he gets A, B, and C. He gets B level property, and we'll discuss this at more at length. Why a debt collector gets B level property? Okay. So in other words, you shouldn't be getting idis. You should be collecting just like any other debt. That the Rabbi Kiva holds that every person collecting debt also gets idis. There's still no kal v'chaimer. In other words, you're saying that if nizaken pays idis, for sure hektish should. There's a contradiction here. In other words, you're saying that if a regular person pays idis, then certainly if a regular debt collector collects idis, certainly the debt collector of hektish, right, it's going to God, also collects idis. The problem with that is that there's a fundamental difference between a debt collector of hektish and a regular debt collector, because a regular debt collector has a certain uniqueness that hektish doesn't have. As you're presuming here that if God gets the money, wow, we have to give it the best property. But there's a fundamental mistake in that presumption. Why? Because if you gore God's animal, what happens? Zero. Nothing happens at all. You don't make any payments. So actually, it's not that convincing that just because the money is going to hektish to the temple, it's going to God, for sure you should have to get the best payments. Because there are leniencies when it comes to the temple stuff. So it's not all that clear that just because hektish gets money, it means it has to get the best money. Samara says no. Okay, we go back. What happened was our ox, one of a regular person's ox, actually gored an ox belonging to the temple fund. And you'll ask me that you should be completely exempt. It's actually a debate, and Rabbi Kiva holds according to the opinion that says that no, you do have to make a payment. The Tanya we learned, Rosh Menasya says, Shor shel hektish, shenogach shor shel hedyot. An ox of hektish that gores an ox of a hedyot, of a regular person's ox, potter. So in other words, the temple ox gores your ox, the temple is exempt from making the payments. However, the opposite is not true. However, if a temple ox, if you gore the temple ox, you have to pay full damages. Not only that, there's no leniency for a tam. Typically, we have with Kara with Gorim, you have leniency for time. You only pay half payment the first 3 times. No such leniency with regard to hektish. How does he understand the verse? He understands the verse as follows: He also has the same derivation. The difference between your ox, i.e., our friends, regular people's oxen, and the oxen of hektish. But what's the difference? The difference is not that hektish that you're exempt if your ox scores hektish's ox. The difference is the contrary. If I damage your ox, how much do I pay? If my ox damages your ox goring, how much do you pay? Half payment. Right, half payment the first time. Obviously limited by the value of my ox. However, if my ox damages hektish's ox, there's no half payment. It's not limited by the value of the ox. So to the contrary, hektish's ox is far more important than mine and your ox. Together? Okay. Okay. Next. What was that?
With hektish, it's his. He wins. Tells you lose.
Exactly. Absolutely. According to Rav Shimon, it's absolutely the case. Yeah, I think a few other people. We'll learn more, but like we saw before, Eved is the same thing. The slave is the same thing. Heads I win, tails you lose. They damage you, the owner is exempt. You damage them, full payment. Same thing with the kids. There's a few things. The Gemara says pigiyos and raw. Meeting them is not a good thing. Okay. Now the next question of the Gemara is one of these Talmudic questions that it's very difficult to conceive exactly why this is such an intuitive question. And this seems to be clearly not like the Gemara. What's the question? The Gemara is going to presume here. Okay, so we have the opinion of Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon says there's a difference between hektish and a regular person's ox. Okay, what was the standard opinion? The default opinion was if my ox gores the ox of the temple, how much do I have to pay? 0, nothing at all. And the opinion of Reb Shimon is how much do I have to pay? Full payment, not limited by the value of my ox. So maybe the Gemara is proposing, maybe the debate between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel has nothing to do with nizik or mazik. It has to do with this question of an ox belonging to hektish. Now we'll see that there are so many reasons why that can't be the case, but let's give a stab at it. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva, the debate between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva, which is clearly referring to a debate about whether the evaluation of idis is the property of the mazik, the damager, or the one who was damaged. Maybe everybody agrees the evaluation is determined by the property of the nizik, the one who was damaged. Here, and the debate between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel is about the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Menashe and the rabbis. Rabbi Kiva savar Rabbi Shimon Menashe, Rabbi Shmuel savar Rabbanon. Rabbi Kiva goes like Rabbi Shimon Menashe that says that if your ox gores an ox of hektish, you make a full payment, and Rabbi Shmuel says you make 0 payment. So Gemara says a few problems with this. First of all, imkain my loy bo hakosov. If this is the case, Rabbi Kiva is not referring to the verse at all. This is a separate question how to understand Shari'eo. Why is Rabbi Kiva interpreting the verse? What was the verse in question? Meitav Sadeo Yishalom. Meitav means the best, Sadeo of his field. And the question obviously is who's the his? Who his? Right? Yishalom is going to pay. That was the question. And Rabbi Kiva directly addresses the question. He says, Loi ba'hakosav. The purpose of the verse is ... The purpose of the verse is to define his as the payers. Who's the payer? The damager. As opposed to Rabbi Shmuel that defines his to be the one whose field was damaged. Because the word field was used earlier in the verse referring to the damaged field. So clearly, Rabbi Kiva is engaging with the pasuk in question, with the verse that Rabbi Shmuel brought, not just with his opinion of whether or not the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon in how to define shari'eo, in whether or not you have to pay when your ox scores an ox of hektish. The question here is not about a kal v'chomer to hektish. The question here is, what does hektish actually pay? No, I'm sorry. Does hektish actually get a payment in the first place? Can you damage hektish and have to pay for it? V'oid, and moreover, ha'amar Rashi Tanya Behedya. The Rashi brings a brice that very specifically spells it out for you. Meitiv Sadeu, Meitiv Karmi Shalom, Meitiv Sadeu Shal Nizik, Meitiv Karmi Shal Nizik. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel is very clear. Who's Meitiv? The best of whose field? The one who was damaged. Rabbi Kiva says Meitiv Sadeu Shal Mazik, Meitiv Karmi Shal Mazik. It's the one who makes the payment, the damager. Okay, now we get into a very interesting question. This is really a separate discussion. We'll get back to it pertains to the question of Meitav, and we'll get back to the original question in a little bit, probably tomorrow. But now Abaye takes a little on a sidetrack, and I would say none of the Gemara basically has a simple question. It's a contradiction, and there is no good resolution to the contradiction until the final resolution of the Gemara, which is absolutely logical, very clear, and makes perfect sense. Abaye had the following question to Rafa. Ksiv Meitav Sadeu Meitav Karmi Shalom. Meitav in Midyach Riniloi. It says you have to pay the best property of your field. What's the implication of that? You have to give the guy good property. Now, is that limited to property? Hold on a second. Tanya, we learned Yoshiv Rabbi's Shavik Kesef Afilu Subin. Okay, so the word here says basically this is the owner of the pit. Somebody falls into the pit, the owner has to pay, right? Balabor Shalom Kesef Labolov. He has to pay money to the owner, but that's not what the verse says. It's kesef yoshev le'ba'olov. The kesef, the money, returns to the owner. What does the word return mean? Says the Gemara, yoshev afilu l'rabbeis shava kesef afilu subin. Yeah, this is a prank that's commonly done, and it happens all the time, where somebody comes out of court and he loses the court case. So being very mad at the other person, he hires a forklift and delivers, $100,000 in dimes. It's about a pound worth of, a couple £100 worth of dimes.
One guy didn't want to pay child support. This was in the news. Forklift, $100,000 in pennies.
Yeah.
Dumped it in front of the house.
Yeah, and apparently the genius robbers apparently recently robbed a U.S. Mint truck, $2 million in dimes or something. Crazy.
$2 million
in dimes.
In dimes.
Yeah.
About $500 worth of dimes. The getaway car couldn't move anymore.
Yeah. I don't know how in the world they carry that away. Okay. Anyway. So but not only that, you don't have to pay dimes. You could pay it in other useless items like fidget spinners. You go try dealing with $10,000 worth of fidget spinners. Not so easy to get rid of.
Yeah, outside any school.
But okay. Basically, it's subin. It can be the lowest quality sellable item, and the payment is still valid. So it's a contradiction. Like, what's going on here? If the Torah wants you to give the easiest form of payment, then you should have to give, a bank wire. It's probably the easiest way to pay. Why can you get away with paying in pennies or in dimes, or fidget spinners for that matter? Subin is specifically bran. It's obviously bran is very light and it's very big. And obviously, it's to make a large payment in bran, it's probably very difficult to get rid of, to actually spend it, to use the money. So what's going on? Why if you're paying in money, can you give the lowest quality of monetary equivalent? You can give fidget spinners. By the way, just to clarify here for a second, as a side note, you could pay in dimes and pennies because that's money. No matter how inconvenient it is for the one who receives the payment. However, in terms of paying with $100,000 of fidget spinners, it's not quite that you can do that. It's not so simple. It's a quantity. It might be too large to sell, so it's not necessarily you can actually pay that. Okay, that's just a side point. But you certainly could pay if you're paying $100, you could pay in fidget spinners, and tell the guy to go figure out how to sell it. Okay, okay. So the Gemara is going to offer a few different proposals. The first one is in other words, the guy's ox goes into a field and he eats up all the corn. Right, the ox consumes all the corn. He owes the guy, $1,000 worth of corn. So he says, "Okay, I owe you $1,000." He says, "Okay, I'm paying you $1,000." He gives him $1,000 worth of fidget spinners.
Oh, okay.
The other potential possibility is the guy says, "No, I don't pay you. I don't believe you. I don't want to pay you anything." And they went to court, and the court says you have to pay. So if the court says you have to pay, then you have to pay $100 cash or the best property. If you pay on your own, then you could give $1,000 worth of fidget spinners.
Oh.
So Amru LeBreder Viloi, Dekanami Dechsiv Yishalom Bakarchai. The word Yishalom means by force. In other words, when the court forces him to pay, then he has to pay the best type of property. Amru Abayas says Miksiv Yishulam. Does it say that he'll literally be forced to pay? Yishalom Ksiv Midaita. Yishalom does not necessarily mean forced. It could also mean willingly. In other words, willingly, he still has to pay the best quality field. Amr Abaya says Kinitanya, like the following brisa. Okay, we'll see here. This brisa takes us to the side for a moment, and then we'll get back to it. Somebody has houses, fields, and vineyards. We'll go with the first. There's two versions in Rashi here. I'm explaining to you according to the first version of Rashi. This guy is otherwise poor, so he has property, but he's otherwise, he has a startup. In modern terms, he has a startup with a huge amount of stock, but he can't sell it. He can't sell it, but he's not able to sell it. So typically, the rule is as follows: how do you define somebody as being poor? Somebody who doesn't have the income for one person to live for half a year, hundreds of. I believe is 1 second. Just make sure I have that right. No, I'm sorry. It's Messiah. It's a full year. It's a full year. It's 200 zuz. In English, it's probably I don't know, between $5,000 and $50,000, $5,000 and probably $30,000. Depends which rabbi you ask. Some will say, most of them will say it's 15,000 to 20,000. It's typically the number that's thrown around. Maybe in inflation, it's a little higher, somewhere around that number. In other words, okay, and if he has less than that amount of money, you can write him out a $50,000 charity check at once. You can write him out a $100,000 check at once. But if he has more than $25,000 in the bank, readily accessible, in a checking account, then you cannot write him out any check. He can't take charity. He's not eligible. So this guy has a lot of money and assets, but they're not really sellable. So we'll see why. We'll see why in a moment. So what's halacha? You can give him mice, or you can give him charity. Ad mechza, until half the value. We'll have to see what that means. We asked the question, hey Chidami, what's going on here? Let's say there was a real estate crash and everybody's property crashed. So that's why he doesn't want to sell it. But this is a global crash. And his real estate property also crashed. So that's the case. If his property crashed and it's now worth less, let's say previously the property was worth $20,000. Now there's a real estate crash, it's worth $10,000. Then he's a poor man. He doesn't have $20,000. Ella must be that he had $10,000 worth of real estate, and there was a real estate boom, and all the properties went up in value. So now he has $20,000 in real estate. El the Oiker to the Kulam of the Isle Benofik Azuzin Zolarid. The problem is his $10,000 property is really worth 20 grand in the market, except that you have the greedy hedge funds that know he's about to go into bankruptcy, and they'll be happy because he's in bankruptcy. They'll offer him a quick deal, for half of what it's actually worth. So for him, because everybody knows he's strapped for cash, he knows he can't get a good price for the house. Everybody will sort of take advantage. They'll fleece him. So if that's the case, I feel important. 1 second. So the Gemara says it doesn't make a difference because ultimately speaking, the value of his property is $20,000. If we give him charity, guess what? He has $20,000 in the bank because then he's not pressed to sell it tomorrow. So if that's the case, then no, you don't give him charity. Well, I'll have to take a loss. And we learned, what are we referring to? We're talking about here about a property that's plowed in the summer. And like you can imagine, if anyone's dealt with pretty low businesses that have very low, what do they call the ratio? No, it would be profitability compared to the value of the business. The classification of the business.
It makes more sense for them to sell the business than to keep on with the profit.
So these are non-growth companies where profit is the key factor in determining the value of the business. those type of businesses sell for profit to asset value prices are very low. Maybe it's 3-to-1. Maybe the property is worth 3 times the value of the prop. For example, you sell a restaurant, how much money are you getting for it? About 3 to 5 times, maybe even less, of the profit you make in a given year. And seller finance, by the way.
And what?
Seller finance.
Okay, all right.
So in other words, not very favorable terms. If on the other hand, you own a business that, you own a distribution company that's growing and expanding, you might get 10 times profit. Your value might be 10 times profits. Valuations, profit to valuation. That's the ratio you look at this. So now these are properties here that, these properties are used to grow hay and straw. So the profit to valuation is not very high. It's very low. It's so low that it's probably about 2 times. So the profit of 1 year is twice the profit is the value of the field. So now when is the field plowed? It's plowed in summertime. So that means prior to the summer, the field is worth twice what it's worth at the end of the summer if it wasn't plowed. Right? Because it's a year's worth of profit you're losing. You have to keep the field for another year until you're going to earn money on it. Right?
Yep.
So basically, in Nisan, the prices are high. Yomi Tishrei, if the field wasn't plowed when it comes Tishrei time, all the prices collapse. Zilarata. The Kulam, everybody naturally Nisan, they'd wait to Nisan, and was happening, they'd sell it then. But this guy needs money, so therefore he has to sell it now. So we say it like this: if he'll get at least half the value that he would have gotten in Nisan, in springtime, then we tell him you have to sell it. This guy's worth $100,000. He has $100,000 worth of fields, but we tell him that if your properties are going to be so devalued, then we'll consider it as not a liquid asset. Because if you're going to only get a quarter of the value of the property, we'll consider it as non-liquid, and then you'll be able to get charity money. Okay. With regard to Nezikim, we have a similar circumstance. Let's see how far we can get. I hope we can finish this. I'm not sure we will. Okay. Dine be'idis. Typically, you get the best field. So what happens? Typically, you're supposed to get idis. Now, let's say the damager says, the guy who was damaged says, you know what? I want a little bit of a bigger field in baininess. The Amrle Havli baininess tfei porta. Give me more baininess over the amount of idis you would give me. Again, the same value, just different size. Amrle, the payer, the damager, the one who's making the payment, they could say, Ishakas kadina shkol. If you want to take this payment, you want to collect from idis, then fine, I'll have to pay you whatever it's worth now, kedahashta, like the value now. But if you're not taking the best field, you want to have a custom deal with me about taking middle range fields, then you'll have to take the price of Nisa, not the price today of Tishrei. Okay, so over here we see you're paying lower value fields and higher value fields. And we're saying that the problem here is when the Torah says pay the best field, is the Torah trying to give the damager more power or less power? What? According to this Gemara, it's less power actually, because he could force you to take the best field. But that's not obvious. It's not what the Torah says. Meitav Sadehu means the Torah is trying to give you an advantage. You have the right to collect up to Meitav. That means that you can demand lower level payment also. Meitav is a right that you have. It's not a defined feature of the payment. You have a right to collect Meitav, but you could also collect lower property. It's your pick. You get to choose what you want to collect, up to and including the highest level of payments. Not to decrease your power, to increase your power. Okay, so now this at this point we're sort of hanging with a question. We have a contradiction. What's the contradiction? When the Torah says you pay for Nezaken, how does it describe it? When you're talking about paying property, it describes paying the best property. And when you talk about paying money, what type of money do we say? You can pay the worst money. Pay fidget spinners, or dimes, nickels, whatever it is. So we have that contradiction. We also have this interesting story about the property that goes up in the winter and goes down in the summer. I'm sorry, goes down in the winter, down in fall and up in spring, because the property is plowed in summertime. Okay, so first thing we'll see tomorrow is the Gemara will first try to explain this thing with the property going up and down in value. Exactly what is that? What would be an equivalent scenario to Nezikin? And then later on, we get to the conclusion, how do we deal with the contradiction between the Torah seems to imply that when you pay property, you pay the best, and when you pay money, really pay anything, any type of cash equivalent.
It has to be equivalent.
Cash, it's not equivalent, it's really cash value. It has to have the value.
Right.
So we'll get to that tomorrow. I'm sorry for the delay again today, and we'll try to start on time tomorrow.